The United Nations is working out a plan to deal with the massive hydropower dam just south of Sudan's border in Ethiopia. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam sits on the Blue Nile River in the western part of the country. And while the dam isn't entirely new, filling its reservoir is. Egypt is calling it an existential threat to their water supply. That's because the Nile provides more than 90% of the fresh water for the country's rapidly growing population. CBS News foreign affairs analyst Pamela Falk joins me now with more. Pam, great to have you on. So the location of this dam isn't directly on the Nile River. It's actually on an offshoot hundreds of miles away. Explain to us a little bit more about this reservoir, the dam, and this ongoing controversy that's become more acute recently.
Yes, Lana, this is absolute power politics. It's Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt slugging it out for the rights to this water, basically. And so you've got two very strategic and important U.S. allies, three countries in economic distress. And Ethiopia is building what is the largest dam called the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and the biggest hydropower plant in Africa. Now, yes, as you say, it is on the Blue Nile, which is one of the two tributaries of the Nile. So that supplies about 80% of the water in the Nile during the rainy season. And as you know, the Nile flows north. And Egypt's worry is that it will reduce the flow of the Nile, the source of about 90% of all of Egypt's freshwater supply. So the stakes are very high. Ethiopia sees the hydroelectric dam as it's a national project. It'll bring them to a new power level and economic level in Africa and in the world. Sudan wants the less expensive electricity and expanded agricultural production, and that is why they've pretty much sided with Ethiopia. But Egypt perceives a possible loss of water as really an existential threat, and they fear for the freshwater supplies. Now, this is 10 years in the making, and it just started getting refilled by Ethiopia without negotiation from all three parties, including Ethiopia. So that's what's going on here.
So, Pam, the issue, as you say, is in many ways an existential threat. It's about more than just filling up a reservoir. In many ways, this dam brings up water rights issues that ultimately could have tremendous impacts on economies, on the power in the region. What kind of regional power shift could this create in northern Africa?
Yes, this is a $4.5 billion dam, by the way. And if you look at the history, and it's important to do that, Egypt controlled the Nile for thousands of years. And so this changes a certain balance of power. It puts Ethiopia in the driver's seat in many ways. And the Biden administration just this week, U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said, look, the Horn of Africa, which of course is the Ethiopia part, is at an inflection point, and Ethiopia's prime minister on Friday tried to reassure Egypt and Sudan that the filling of this new dam will not inflict any harm. But it's 80% complete, by the way, and it expects to reach full generation capacity in about 2 years, by 2023. So it will be the largest hydroelectric dam, and it does shift the balance of power. Ethiopia and Sudan say they have the right to exploit the Nile waters to further their economies. They're in desperate straits, and the dam gives Ethiopia economic and political clout, but it really worries Egypt.
I feel like you and I could talk about water wars and these struggles ad nauseum.
Look at where we are, the Middle East and the Horn of Africa. If you look at the map, it's unbelievably important.
You know, while I have you for just another minute, Pam, obviously, as we're talking about Ethiopia, I'd like to get your take on the conflict in the northern Tigray region, because We have been covering these horrific reports of human rights abuses against both children and adults, in addition to a worsening humanitarian crisis. Can you tell us more about the United Nations Human Rights Council considering a resolution to add it to its agenda? This conflict has been happening since last November. Why is UN just now considering taking this on as an agenda item, and what do they hope to do?
All right. And Lana, one little postscript to the dam is that the UN has now decided the African Union can mediate the conflict, so we can put that aside. On Tigray, this is a conflict that really started in November, so it's about 8 months old. The Ethiopian government troops moved against forces. That sent the Eritrean forces from over the border into Ethiopia, into the Tigray region. And that's when you started to see gross, just appalling human rights violations, including acts of sexual violence against children and adults, mass killing, recruitment of kids, and famine, with 400,000 people estimated to have crossed the threshold into famine, is what the UN said last week, and another almost 2 million on the brink of famine. So what is needed is that the Ethiopian government, and this is Abiy Ahmed, who received a Nobel Peace Prize for his mediation for Ethiopia with the Ethiopian-Eritrean conflict. He's an ally of the United States. The United States wants to aid Ethiopia and continue to be an ally, but he's looking the other way as this goes on, and to some extent condoning it. And so the UN Human Rights Council, the UN Security Council has taken it up and been very clear that the ceasefire that the Ethiopian government has committed to, because they were in a military weakened position, has to be accepted in a way that puts Tigray back in a governing position. This has nothing to do with religion, by the way, and we always talk about how many religious conflicts there are around the world. This has to do with ethnic differences, with history of Tigray being independent and its own self-governing region. And so the idea here is Ethiopia's got to get back to a dialogue with the Tigrayans. And right now, as of this morning, I spoke to people in the Mekelle hospital, and they said they're not getting, despite reports that the World Health Organization, World Food Program, and they have aided to some extent. They've gotten some aid in, but the aid's not flowing, and no vaccines are getting in, so there's coronavirus. And people want not only what the UN Human Rights Council would do, which is accountability for the crimes that were committed, but also to just get that aid in and stop the fighting. It's brutal, and it really has to change. So the UN Security Council met in order to really be able to have the world see what's going on and then perhaps go further.
It really is so horrific, the reports that we've heard about hunger being used as a weapon of war. Pam Falk, thank you for staying on top of all of this and bringing your great reporting to us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good talking to you, Lana.